Hello. So in this video, I want to show you an example of some seasonal indices and how to calculate them based on the idea that the demand for a given period is maybe above or below some notion of a baseline. So in our example, the baseline is going to be the average of the demand, and that'll kind of smooth out the ups and downs of it. And then with respect to that average, we're going to calculate an index that tells us for each individual month whether the demand is sort of above that baseline or below, and when it is above and below, how far and what percent above or below. So first I want to get just a baseline to work with so that we can calculate these indices for each month. And I'm just using 1 year of demand here, but this might be like a profile or an aggregate of a bunch of different years. And usually when you're dealing with indices, you're taking them with respect to several years of data, not just 1 year. It doesn't really make sense. But in this case, this might be some kind of aggregate where we've already aggregated the several different years, and we're working with something that's kind of like a profile for demand. So, okay, or an average of some kind. And we'll come back to this a little bit later on. But for now, I have this 1 year of demand, and I'm going to base my indices off of just the average of that year. So I'm going to take the average and drag down B2 to B13, and I'm going to make that absolute for the whole range because I'm going to drag it down. I don't want it to move. So the average of this year of demand is 3560. So drag that down so we can see it everywhere. And so this is going to be my baseline, right? I'm going to use this as the baseline. Good. And then let's get a picture of this. And we're going to also do a forecast after we're done with this using the indices once we've computed them. So I'm going to get a picture here that kind of has all of these columns like this, both the forecast and the seasonalized forecast as well too, and I'll show you what that is when we get to it. But at least for this one, I want to see the demand and I want to see the baseline together with it as well too. So I'm going to select down to month 16 and then also all over to column E as well. And I'm going to say insert chart. And now go and get the, whoops, I don't know what that is. Go and get the line chart. That looks good. And now here, I'm going to go ahead and put in my lollipops like I always do. So go over to series, apply to all series. Let's put in some lollipops. Looks like I have some stuff going on down there that I don't need. So let's see if I can get rid of that. For that, go back over to setup and then go down here. And I want to use column A as labels. I think that'll fix that. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so there's months 1 through 16, like that. And it starts right here at this 21, 27, and then it goes here. This is the 35, 60, and so on. And then over here I have the next 4 months, which I'm not showing yet, but we will be doing a forecast over here as well too. So this is my demand, and this is the baseline. So this is that average that we calculated, the 35, 60. So I want to put this down. And then, let's see. Okay, so we're going to calculate our indices over here based on this baseline. So the months that are below the baseline will have an index below 1, and the months that are above the baseline will have an index that's above 1. And say it's like 1.23, that would mean it's 23% above the baseline. And if it was 1.05, it would be like 5% above the baseline. Okay, so there's the picture of what we're going to do. And then over here, I want to just calculate these indices. And they're pretty easy to calculate once you have the notion of a demand value and some baseline you want to compare it to. So the index is going to be just the demand divided by the baseline. So it's going to be this divided by what we're considering as the baseline. And so that's an index of 0.60. And what that means is the height here for this demand is 60% of the baseline, right? So it's 0.60 of the base. And now I think I could just drag these down and get the indices for the entire year. So here the indices are bigger than 1. And for example, for month 8, It's right here. This is 1.48, so that means it's 48% above the baseline at that point right there. So in essence, that's the way you calculate the indices. You always compare the actual demand, maybe in an aggregated form, and we'll see an example of that later on, but the actual demand as compared to some kind of baseline. And again, when the index is something like 1.13, that means it's 13% above baseline. 1.07 would mean 7% above the baseline. 0.92 means that it's 8% below the baseline. I think that's this one. No, wait. At number 4, it's like this one right here, 8% below the baseline. Okay, so that's our indices. So we got the indices. Now let's use them to make some forecasts into the future. Suppose I have an average forecast for the future, and say it's at 4,000. So we expect things to pick up a little bit, and maybe the average forecast for the next 3 months is at 4,000. So I'm going to put that in. So here's the forecast up here. Maybe it's a little bit above what our baseline was. And you could make it above or you could make it below, and this technique still works. And once you have the average baseline over here in the future, you can use the indices from those months to kind of re-seasonalize this forecast and actually put the seasonality back into it. So whenever you multiply by an index, you're putting the seasonality back into the data. So here I have some unseasonal or non-seasonal values. Is 4,000, 4,000, 4,000, 4,000, just straight across here, no seasonality. And I'm going to put the seasonality back into it, and the way to do that is by multiplying. So I go up here and get the index in month 1 because that's January there, and then times the non-seasonal value is right over here, that 4,000. And so when I multiply those together, it gives me the seasonal version. It looks like it's jumping down there. Let's go ahead and drag these down, and then let's make sure they did the right thing. And when I click on this one, it's the 4th index times that, and that drops it down. So it should look kind of like the first 4 months over here, right? And I guess we got to actually go in and put the lollipops on. So that series doesn't really have them on them yet. So I go in here, series, and which one is it? It's the seasonalized forecasts, and that one got slipped in there without the lollipops. So let's put them on. Okay, and now let's discuss what we have. So here, this forecast, the seasonalized forecast, is now 2390. So this is dropped down so that it's 40% below the baseline, right? Here's the baseline this time. It's at 4,000. That's this average right here. And if I drop down 40% from that, it's at 2390. And then likewise for these guys as well, too. They're down 29% and 15% and then 8%. And you can see it looks very similar to the shape over here. And in fact, you could make the forecast for the future, the average forecast for the future, you know, going up some as well too. So you could do 4,000 here, and you could do 4,050 here, and then you could do, you know, 4,100 there, and you could do, you know, 4150 there, and it would kind of go up. And you would see this shape, the same shape, kind of crawl up after it as well too. So it doesn't have to be, the baseline doesn't have to be flat. You can have any kind of baseline here. And in fact, this baseline going into the future for this forecast here might be a regression line that goes up from the original data and, you know, tracks the trend of it. So it could be going uphill like this, for example. And then you would seasonalize back off of that using the indices. So again, multiplying by a seasonal index puts the seasonality into the data. So later on we'll see if we need to take the seasonality out, it'll be by dividing by an index. So that's handy to keep in mind.